Begin, we would like to take a moment to honor the lives of those that we have lost to violence, including those who died in the recent mass shooting in Indianapolis and Atlanta. And we like to also honor our youth whose lives were lost due to police violence in Chicago, Minneapolis, Tennessee, Honolulu, and more. So I invite everyone to join me in a collective breath and moment before we begin. All attendees have access to the healing breakout room. So if you need a moment, please feel free to enter the room and or to take a break. All right. And I'd like to thank everyone for being here and for being part of the fourth event of our Solidarity in Action series. And some of you are wondering, what is the Solidarity in Action series? It is an educative series that provides training to keep each other safe with the goals of building community and solidarity. And before we begin, I'd like to thank our team who made this series possible, including Maureen, Ben, Robin, and our volunteers, our youth volunteer, Anshika and Leah. So thank you so much, everyone. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. So before we begin, I'd also like to introduce to you our trainer, Halima. So Halima is a Gen Z South Asian American gender justice activist, facilitator and workshop speaker who has trained over 700 people in equity-related topics, including Islamophobia, bystander intervention, and gender-based violence. Halima's commitment to gender justice comes from her lived experiences and from the dire needs of her community. In her free time, Halima leads media trainings for Muslim women and teaches self-defense to build safety and power in her community. So in today's 60-minute training, you will learn about safe, nonviolent interventions you can do when witnessing verbal harassment of any kind. The intervention model is survivor-centered and aims to minimize harm and de-escalate. Participants will learn 4 steps of intervention and receive a follow-up email with ways to actively practice using this tool to keep each other safe. It is on us to look out for each other. You will get a walkthrough of 4 steps to intervention, along with some time to think about what you might say or do in a scenario. With that said, I'm going to, and actually before we give the mic to Halima, I just want to invite you all to, welcome to today's training, but also we have one coming up on May 1st with personal self-defense. And you can follow us on Instagram and our social media platforms to learn more about that event, and hopefully you can join us. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Halima.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. How's everyone doing? It was good to see some of the responses in the chat. And like Jenny said, today we will be focusing on bystander intervention. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of please. I think it might be Jenny or Maureen, are you able to share screen? For some reason, my Zoom keeps crashing whenever I share screen. Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you so much for doing that. So today we are going to be going over bystander intervention training, and bystander intervention training is a helpful tool for de-escalating and minimizing harm in the case of verbal harassment. So it's a tactic that you can use to help prevent or interrupt violence or harassment. And the model is really rooted in solidarity. So we're here to offer support and solidarity through this tangible act. And it can include many phases. I just want to name and recognize that, scenarios don't happen as we imagine them to always. And in moments of panic or trauma, there's a lot of moving pieces. So bystander intervention, I will be going over 4 steps, but I just want to name that all those 4 steps may not happen, 1, 2, 3, 4. They might happen in various orders. So we can go to the 3rd slide. And there's 3 different kind of ways that we see bystander intervention play out. It could be before something even happens. So this could look like, preemptively noticing, okay, I see that someone may be getting agitated or, continues to stare at an individual. You might feel like this gut reaction that something might happen. So it might mean you're preemptively taking action or naming it before it happens, or walking up to the targeted person before it happens and just sitting with them. It could also include stepping in during a situation while something is occurring. And we'll talk about what this would look like. And it could also look like offering support after something has already occurred. So bystander intervention might include, depending on how things play out, it might include you doing all of these 3 components, or it might be 1 or 2 of them. And so it's just I wanted to name that because we can plan and we can practice, but in real life, things will happen in whatever order. So I will be using a couple of key terms. We'll go to the next slide. And these terms I'll be referencing throughout the training. So when I say targeted person, I'm referring to the person who's being targeted, impacted by the violence. And I personally prefer to use this term because I don't want to put a narrative of victim or survivor on an individual, and I want individuals to have their full autonomy to decide how they're feeling and what narrative they would like to claim. You'll also hear me say perpetrator or attacker, and this is just naming the person that has caused harm or is causing harm, and bystander, which is referring to a third party that is seeing the incident happening. And I try to avoid gendering any of these terms, or not to assume gender identity of parties involved, just to move beyond the gender binary and unlearn some of those socialized norms. So you'll hear me use a lot of gender neutral terms. So as Jenny said, this training is definitely focused and coming from a perspective of a survivor-centered approach. And so there's a few reminders and key things I would like to name when it comes to that. If we go to the next slide, these are some pieces that kind of expand on what it means to have a survivor-centered approach. So when we're doing bystander intervention with this framework in mind, we're realizing that this is really about the impacted person, right? It's about their feelings, their experience, and their needs. And that's what we want to center throughout the process. We want to make sure they have given consent, they have autonomy in deciding what they would like to do in terms of moving forward, how they want to deal with the situation. So that's what we're centering in this. We're also recognizing that, we see this commonly, and you see this behind me on my screen, that those most impacted by the issue are closest to the solution. And so keeping in mind that every individual who has been impacted by violence is closest to the solution and what is best for them. And this quote from Patricia Hills Collins, I feel like really encapsulates this. So Patricia says, "What people know and think are intrinsically wrapped up with class position. Also notice that the elite in any society exercises disproportionate control over what ideas are accepted as truth." And so really, naming that, we want people to have autonomy and self-determine what is best for them. And a lot of times people, especially from, different positionalities and places of privilege, may want to say, I think this is best for you, but we really want to hold that those impacted know what they need. And this also recognizes that everyone has a range of experiences, and that their identities and their experiences are going to impact what their needs are. And so again, we want to hold space for that, and we want to recognize, for example, for certain communities, police is going to escalate. It could be a death sentence. And so that's recognizing that everybody has a different positionality and different needs. And then also finally acknowledging that the system that we have in place doesn't meet the needs of many of our communities, and it can actually further disempower our communities. And so violence prevention and long-term work is needed to address some of the systems in place and the root causes that continue to uphold violence and oppression against our communities. So I just want to name that because there are so many limitations within the systems that we're working within. And some of them can't be immediately addressed, but we can actively organize towards dismantling them as we practice bystander intervention as a more immediate kind of tool that we have. So I wanted to pause and kind of allow people to share in the chat, when you think of bystander intervention, what do you feel like is a goal of bystander intervention, and when should it be used? So we can go to the next slide. And if folks want to share in the chat, feel free to drop a few responses to de-escalate. Yes, that's a great one. Anything else? Yeah, so I see a de-escalation again, and that's a really key part of bystander intervention because we want to minimize harm as much as possible. And we want to show solidarity and practice like community safety. I also see someone shared in the chat, to make the targeted person feel safer. And yes, all of those things. So we want to make sure we're showing up in those ways and with those intentions. When should it be used? This is, there's the 3 kind of stages that I mentioned. It could be before something's happened, during an incident, or it could be after an incident has occurred and you're coming to provide that support. And we'll talk about different questions that you can reflect on, during the early process of intervention. When you think about, does it make sense for me to intervene, not intervene, etc. So those are really key things to remember. So now we're going to transition into an overview of bystander intervention. There are 4 steps that I'll be sharing. And we'll go to the next slide, and they'll be accompanied by graphics. So you can find this online, and I'll be sharing this after the session as well. This was illustrated and written by Mariel, who you can find on Instagram. And so this offers really easy 4 steps to remember. So the first step is to assess the situation. And I'll go into details for all of these steps in a second. And so this is when you are assessing, identifying where is the situation happening, what's going on, that kind of stuff. The second step is to ask another bystander to support you, keeping in mind that if there are people around, you can ask someone else to help. And it doesn't have to fall on you alone to do the intervention. And then step 3 is to approach the targeted person and ignore the attacker. This one, for some of us, may be one that we have to really keep in mind, because our instincts or our first reaction might be to face off with the attacker, or to go speak directly to the attacker or address them. The reason why I say ignore the attacker is just going back to our goal, right? We want to de-escalate, and we want to reduce and minimize harm. And I'm reminded of the tragic incident that took place in Portland, where a Muslim woman was facing Islamophobic violence, and 2 people stepped in. I believe it was on a train or something of that nature. And 2 people stepped in to support her, and they were killed as a result because the harasser had a weapon. So I just want to be really mindful of keeping in mind that we don't want to increase the level of harm, and we want to minimize and reduce it as much as possible. So by ignoring the attacker, we are focusing on our goal of de-escalation. And then finally, we want to offer options to the targeted person for how you can support them. And part of why I say offer options is because in a moment of panic, when we say, how can I help you, which is completely appropriate to say as well, people may not know what they need in that moment. So it can help to say, here are 2 or 3 things I can do. And of course, you can always leave an open-ended, anything else too that I didn't mention, I'm happy to do. And so those are the 4 steps. So assess the situation, ask another bystander to support you, approach the targeted person and ignore the attacker, and offer options to the targeted person for how you can support them. So in the next slide, we're going to go into some of the questions that you can ask when you're in step 1 of assessing the situation, right? When you're witnessing something happening, either before, you're seeing it starting to happen, or you've come into the middle of it happening, thinking of who is harming and who is being harmed. So this can help you identify, the different positionalities, the different needs, what kind of violence is happening. Is it verbal? Is it physical? Those kind of things can also help you identify what the right approach will be. What is the location of the attack? Is it in a busy area? Is it at night? Is it in an empty area? Is it in a moving bus, train? Is it inside a store? Those things can also help you when we talk about the next steps in terms of how you can intervene. Also trying to discern, if possible, if the harasser is attacking due to bias or discrimination. Are they saying anything that might indicate this is motivated by race or gender or religion? Or are they doing this because they would like to get a purse or a phone or an item of value? Or are there other reasons? And you can try to discern if possible. Sometimes we may not know, sometimes it may be obvious. And that can help, because if the person is after an item of value, the situation is almost a little bit easier, because you can always throw your phone or bag or money or whatever away from the person, and they can go take that and leave. But if the attack is motivated due to the person's identity, that's when it might be a little bit more difficult, because their intention is for that specific reason. You might also want to think of what are some exit plans, if the situation does escalate. You're thinking, I'm seeing this happening, I want to intervene, I'm preparing to intervene. And if I do intervene, should things escalate, what is my backup plan? How do I leave? How do I leave with others? So that might mean positioning yourself in a specific way, if you can, closer to an exit strategy. And then also you can assess, what are the risks if no actions are taken, and what are the risks if actions are taken. I say this because in some situations, bystander intervention may actually cause a risk. So I think a common example that I think of is domestic disputes between two individuals who might be in some kind of relationship. There might be verbal abuse happening or other kind of abuse, and then the intervention might result in like an escalated situation for the person who has to go home with that partner. So those are situations where we want to take a moment to just think, like, what are the risks if no actions are taken? What are the risks if actions are taken before we intervene? So step 2 is to ask another bystander to support you. And we'll go to the next slide. In this step, you want to first, keep in mind that when you're approaching another person, you want to name, that where your positionality is. People might think that you agree with what's happening, etc. So an easy thing that you could say is, hi, my name is Halima. I see what's happening. I think it's wrong. Can you help me? You can also say something like, I'm trained in bystander intervention. So there's some credibility there. I would encourage all of you to think of like one sentence that you would say to ask another bystander to support you. And it's important to, something that's comfortable to your vernacular, something that you would say, and to practice saying that with a friend. Practice just keeping that on the top of your mind. So if you are seeing something happening and you want to intervene, you have it ready. And so you can offer a couple of options for how you would like to be supported. Because again, in moments of panic or just an open ask for help may not always result in someone knowing what to do. So since you have gone through this training, you can use some of these options, right? You can say, can you help me by taking a picture or a video, right? And that way, someone is kind of watching and supporting as you go in to do the main intervention. Maybe you're going to ask, can you, if it's on a bus, can you go to the bus driver? If you're in a store, can you go to the store manager? Can you note the area of, where this is happening? Can you get the details of cross street, etc.? And then it might also be, should things escalate, I want you to do X, Y, and Z, like call mall security, etc. So you can put whatever else too that makes sense for the moment. If there are other things that come to mind for what would be helpful in the intervention. And so this is helpful because you probably heard the term bystander effect, right? When we just broadly ask for help, sometimes everyone thinks, somebody else is going to do it and then nobody does it. So be specific when you're going up to someone. You could even say, oh, person in the, jeans and red shirt, can you help me intervene? Or like just going up to someone directly and asking them. So the ask is specific, and you're also asking a specific individual to support you. And they might say no too. So just keeping that in mind, they might not be comfortable doing that. You can try to ask someone else to help you as well. And then step 3 is approach the targeted person and ignore the attacker. So when you're approaching the targeted person, again, you want to be mindful of how you approach, and you want them to know like you're here to support them. They might feel like, oh, is someone else, coming to add to the harassment? So you might want to be mindful of like your body language, maybe using your hands to kind of show, like keeping them close to your heart, maybe just different gestures to try to convey through your body language and verbally that you are here to help. So you could say something like, my name is Halima, I'm here to help you, or my name is Halima, I think what's happening is wrong, can I support you? And then ask for permission. I think it's really important that we don't just go and intervene without the consent of the individual. So if possible, ask, can I sit with you? Can I stand next to you? Can I walk with you? Just asking if they're comfortable with that. And I have spoken to individuals who have preferred not to have someone intervene because they face the situation or scenarios so many times that they found their own way to cope with it or handle it. So just keep in mind that not everyone may want help. So first, when you ask them for permission, they say yes. You will want to then engage in a conversation with the targeted person and ignore the attacker. So you can talk about the weather, you can talk about like the Warriors game, a movie, anything that's coming to mind, a favorite restaurant, but just keep a conversation going. And we'll talk a little bit about like verbal de-escalation and using your voice and potentially might raising your voice a little bit to drown out the person, things like that. But this is just important to ignore the targeted person as you're continuing this conversation. Also be mindful of your body position. You never want to turn away completely from the harassers. You always want to keep them in your eye line. So you don't want to turn your back completely, but you also don't want to be facing them fully per se. So just try to keep them in your eye line. This way you don't have your back turned to the person and you can see, if things were to escalate, etc. Typically, I find for verbal harassment, when you ignore the attacker, they tend to like slowly drown out or leave the situation. But again, it also depends on what their motivations are for harassment or why they're there. And then you might offer to, at this point, think about next steps. So in step 4, you would be offering options to the targeted person, and this could look like leaving the situation. So you could offer to, if this is a place where you can actually physically get up and move. If you're on a train or a bus, you can say, we can get off at the next stop. We can wait for the next train or bus to come. You can ask, do you want to move to another area? Is there someone you can call for them? If the person is walking or heading somewhere, you can offer to accompany them to their next destination. Just something to offer next steps to them so they don't feel like, okay, now, even after the scenario is over, I'm just left hanging. And then you can also offer like the open question, is there anything I can do to support you? So if the person says no, they're okay, they're fine, they got this, respect their wishes. And personally, if you're feeling still a little bit like unhinged or uncomfortable, just like having this person just kind of go do their own thing, you can always watch from far away and still respect their wishes and not, be in their personal space. So just keep that in mind too, because I know even for the bystander, it can be very, and for people seeing the incidents, very traumatic. And sometimes we feel like, okay, we still want to like hold space. So you can do that from far away if you feel like that makes sense or it feels appropriate for the situation. And I'll pause here to see if there are any questions from folks so far about these 4 steps, and also wanting to tap into the knowledge in this space. We all have various lived and learned knowledge. So if there are additional things that you would add to this, offer different options that you would offer, additional steps, definitely put them in the chat. So I'll pause for that. Any questions? Okay, we are going to move to the next slide. And this is really a pause for us to review the 4 steps of intervention. So I want folks in the chat, if you can remember the 4 steps, to share them back. And this is important because we need to keep practicing intervention. So even after this workshop is over, I will be sending you all a activity that you can practice. Oh, folks are remembering: assess, ask, approach, and offer. Yes. Assess the situation, ask another bystander for support. And what's the third one? Approach the targeted person. And number 4, offer options to the targeted person. So yes, I'm glad that folks remembered. I would urge all of you to keep running through those, and we'll talk about some additional tips and how you can use additional resources to de-escalate a situation. So now we're going to move to the next slide. And in this slide, I wanted to focus specifically on verbal de-escalation and how you can use your voice to either get help for yourself or to get help as a bystander from other people. So your tone of voice really does make a difference, I think, when we're speaking. And this kind of goes to our earlier step about approaching the targeted person, and we start having a conversation with them and engaging with them. We can be intentional about our tone of voice, right? It might be a more quieter tone, or it might be a louder tone if we feel like we need to take up more audio space. And then verbal intervention technique is more so if you are personally facing harassment, but you can also adapt it as for bystander intervention. So a lot of times when something is happening, right, we hear people say something like a help, and it doesn't necessarily let people know what is happening. So you can be more specific by using this approach, right? You can say something like, the person with the black t-shirt and the jeans, get your hand off my thigh, I don't know you, instead of saying like, get off me. And then people might think like, oh, maybe these are friends bickering, or like maybe they know each other. So then you're being specific and you're saying, I don't know this person, I don't consent to this. You're letting people around you know what is happening. And then you can specifically take that further to get others involved. So you can say, oh, person with the pink purse and the sunglasses, can you help me by doing X, right? So maybe it's like, can you help me by calling the bus driver? Can you help me by standing next to me? So instead of just saying, I need help, or can someone help me, you're specifically asking someone to help you, and you're also asking for how you'd like to be helped. And I know this isn't ideal always, because it's still putting the onus on those impacted by violence. And again, I think that's where we come to the limitations of our current system and where things are at. So I offer this more as like a interim tool until we come up with better solutions to address the root causes of violence and don't have to face these issues altogether. The other technique that you can use is a broken record method technique, and I'll send a video tutorial for this as well after the session. But it's when you say the same thing over and over again. So if you're walking down the street and someone's like catcalling, for example, you can keep saying the same thing over and over again. So you could say, have a good day, have a good day, have a good day, or whatever phrase you feel comfortable saying. And again, your tone of voice can change and really impact this. You could say, have a good day, have a good day, have a good day, or you could say, have a good day, have a good day. So it just depends on what feels comfortable to you and in that moment. And I would, all of you, I would urge all of you to trust your instincts with this. So those are some ways that you can use your voice to verbally de-escalate a situation or address something if you are facing harassment or if you're seeing harassment happening. And then there's also resources that you can use on your phone. And this is a list that I've put together from some research that I've done. A lot of these are more geared towards, well, a couple of these are more geared towards sexual harassment or street harassment. But these are helpful because they are good alternatives to police. So for example, the Watch Over Me app and the Circle of Six app, they both let you basically get in contact with your emergency contacts very quickly. So at Circle of Six, you pick 6 people that you know who will help you. And I would also refer folks to check out the Bay Area Transformative Justice pod mapping, so you can kind of map out like who are those 6 people that, you know, if you were to call them, you know for sure they have your back and they would be able to help you no matter what. They also have a Spanish version of this app, by the way. So this app, you can put in those 6 people, and then all you have to do is 2 taps to let the people in that circle know that you need help. So that's a much easier way instead of having to call people and all of that. And then Watch Over Me is another app. So this one makes it even easier. So even if your phone is locked, all you have to do is shake the phone, and then it turns on the phone's alarm. It takes a video, and it turns a video and camera on, and then it also sends an alert to your emergency contacts. So you can select who those emergency contacts would be. Again, these 2 are both really great alternatives to like feeling like you have to call 911 if that's like the fastest thing. So these make it really easy to do that. I would also say the other thing to keep in mind is your phone's built-in settings. So if you have an Android or if you have an iPhone, you can definitely look at your emergency SOS settings, and you're able to program it. So for example, with my phone, if I just do like 3 clicks, I have an iPhone. So if I do 3 clicks to the power button, I programmed it so that I don't have to do the slide to do the emergency SOS. It'll just do 3, 2, 1, and then it'll immediately do the call to emergency contacts, and I believe to police as well. And then you have the option for iPhone to add the emergency sound to it. So if you think a sound could help in a situation, you could do that. Or if you prefer to be more discreet, you can take the sound out. And then for Android, Android has its own kind of feature with the emergency SOS. I think you can program it to, if you shake your phone, it'll turn on your video, audio, camera, and then send your location to your emergency contacts, and I believe to police as well. So I would urge all of you to look through your phone's emergency settings, get familiar with it and program it. And then also practice using your phone to discreetly take videos of something. So for example, if you are seeing something happening and you're, you know, the second bystander, so meaning you might be the person asked to take a picture or a video, you can learn to turn your camera on without looking at your screen and discreetly record. Sometimes discreetly recording might be a safer option for you and also to kind of maintain the goal of de-escalation. Sometimes it might be better to put the camera in the person's face and let them know, like, you know, we're watching you, we see what's happening. Again, I would leave that completely up to you to discern what option makes the most sense for the particular incident that you are responding to. So with my phone, you know, whenever I'm writing BART or something, I'll just practice without looking at my phone, turning on my camera and recording. With the iPhone, you can do easy swipes, or they have the button on the home screen with a little camera icon at the bottom right. I know with Androids there's similar features, so definitely practice doing that and doing so quickly too, because sometimes when, you know, I know for me personally, when I'm panicked, my hands might be shaking and, you know, it might be trying to move really fast. It might be adrenaline. So I try to sometimes stimulate that scenario and try to see how fast I can get my camera on and discreetly record. So that's just a good way to practice. And then there's also broader apps that are more resource oriented. So there's My Plan, this one, and iHollaback. They're more for addressing gender-based violence or sexual harassment or intimate abuse in relationships. So those are more resource oriented. And then there's a tech safety app, which I would recommend to everyone. This one provides information and resources to identify technology facilitated harassment, stalking, or abuse. So it includes a lot of digital security tips, which I think are really key and important to keep in mind. So definitely download the app. It's been very helpful for me. I will pause here to see if there's any questions. And then I see someone asked a question of how can we assess the potential for suffering harm at the hands of the perpetrator? Are you speaking to the the after effects of violence on an impacted person? I think that question was from Ed. Oh, suffering violence by intervening. Yes, ideally, we'll talk about this in a second, actually, where I would, for everyone, you know, when you're assessing the situation and you feel like this could result in you facing harm, I think everyone has their own comfort zones and boundaries and limitations on what they're willing to do and not do. So we'll speak about that in a minute, and I'll ask everyone to kind of take a minute to assess that for themselves. If we go to the next slide, I did want to name before we move towards practice and all that, to just think about alternatives to police. I know a lot of us have, you know, even for myself, you know, socialized that the first number we think of when we're in a state of panic is 911. And we have to work to actively change that. There's a lot of scenarios that don't need police intervention. And, you know, even if police are called, they're not going to be able to respond in time. Especially also in a lot of incidents that involve Black people or people of color. Bringing in police automatically means there's a weapon and there's a chance that it could escalate and even result in death. So I take calling police extremely seriously. For me personally, I've seen it as a very, 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 very last resort. And so there are alternatives to who you can call instead, right? You can call people who have authority or decision-making power. So if there's verbal harassment happening, you can ask, you know, can we get a store manager? Can we get a supervisor? Can we get a security guard, right? Can we get a bus driver? These are all people who have some kind of authority or decision-making power, you know, in our society. And in a scenario where some kind of harassment is happening, they may be able to help resolve the situation by saying, okay, I need you to get off the bus, or you can't be in the store anymore. Or they might have their own protocols, you know, if you go to a mall security guard. So those are options and alternatives that you can think of before, you know, coming to the conclusion that police need to be called. I would also recommend, you know, using apps like Circle of Six. You know, you have those immediate access to your friends, your neighbors, people in your community or your workplace. And it's really important that we build relationships with these people in advance. So when we do call them for help, you know, we might even have shared protocol. We might have even done safety planning together to determine what actions each individual might take if they're called to respond to the scene. And then there's also a lot of trained community safety teams and organizations. So I will include a list in the follow-up email. But these are people who have been trained in community safety and de-escalation. We have a lot of them in our community. And, you know, if you're doing an event, if you're going to be in a space and you feel like, okay, we need some form of security, these are great organizations to call and ask to support. They're also great organizations to have their numbers on in your phone. So I know with the Mental Health Oakland First, through the Anti-Terror Police Project, they actually have a hotline number that you can call. So these are all numbers that, you know, we want to put into our phones and keep so they're easily accessible if something happens. And then finally, I wanted to close out by speaking about our different comfort zones, right? We'll go to the next slide. So I just want everyone to take time to identify what your zones are, right? So when we're, you know, walking around, like, and this is different for everyone. I think everyone has their own comfort zones based on their experience, their needs, etc. So that's why I think everyone should take some time to identify what this looks like for them. So when you're in your green zone, you know, you're chilling, you're relaxed, shoulders down, you might have, you know, music in, everything's good. And then yellow zone is alert and ready. So this is when you might see something happening and now your, you know, music has stopped. You're keeping an eye on the situation. You might see someone approaching another person. You might hear someone raising their voice. And those are all indicators to you that something might be happening and I need to pay attention and be alert. And then red is activated. So this is when you're at a point where you officially, you know, recognize that something is happening and I'm completely activated. I'm in bystander intervention mode and I'm going to be taking next steps. For every individual, I think based on our abilities, based on our knowledge, our experience, we're all going to have different comfort levels with how we are willing to intervene. And this also, you know, from our training and things like that. I know some people who are comfortable intervening if there's a weapon involved because they've been trained and they have experience with that. And I know some people who are not, and that is completely okay. I think for all of us, we should know when we are comfortable intervening, when we're not comfortable intervening, when what we're willing to risk and not risk. And for me, you know, I've kind of been exploring and learning that on my own too, as incidents have happened and I've responded. About 2 weeks ago, I was at a press conference launching an initiative called Not One More Girl, which is a community-driven initiative to address gender-based violence and sexual harassment on BART. And we were doing a press conference at West Oakland, and one of our trans youth, you know, was up at the podium speaking. And as she went up to speak, we saw someone kind of in the background, you know, making some noise, commotion. At that point, I was in yellow mode, right? I was, okay, something is happening. I'm not sure what it is, but something is happening. So I'm keeping my eye on this person. And then the individual starts kind of walking up and saying, F you, F you, F you. And so this is a point where I'm completely activated. And now I'm seeing this individual coming closer and closer to the youth that's speaking at the podium. So I immediately, like just instinctually, I didn't even think about it. I just went up and I put myself between her and the harasser. And so the harasser kind of kept going, you know, saying whatever. I didn't say anything. I wasn't planning to say anything. I just wanted to kind of put myself there. And at that point, I knew that I was okay with that person punching me. So that's how I learned what my boundary was. It was just in that moment. I didn't have my hands up or anything like that. Person really easily could have done any of those things. That person also didn't have a mask on. So there was a lot of things in that moment that I learned about what I was willing to do and not do. And sometimes that's how we learn what we're willing to do and not do, is in the moment. And sometimes we know like these are things that we absolutely are not comfortable doing. So I think it's really important for all of us to know our comfort zones and know like where we get activated, where we feel alert. And for all of us, that's going to look different based on our environment, you know, our own experience. I know for some of the people at that press conference who are survivors of violence, who directly faced gender-based violence, that was very, very triggering, and they were not positioned or comfortable intervening that directly, and that's okay. So I just want to name that all of us have different comfort levels, and it's completely okay, and to hold space for that. And I see a question in the chat. With this intervention method, does it distract from the 5D method? Is that applicable or not? Yes, so I think that is definitely applicable. I think as much as you can get creative with the intervention. If we can create a noise distraction, let's do that. I'm currently working with a team of community members on safety planning as we're doing more activations and pop-ups for this initiative, Not One More Girl. And you know, after what happened at the press conference, we were all concerned that something like this could happen again, and we did not want to call police, and we're all committed to not doing that. So we've been planning what we would do if something like this happens again. And some of the things that we've come up with is doing a chant to drown out any negative comments. So we've identified who would be the chant leader in our group. All of us would kind of be following the chant. We also have like cowbells, so it's like just a way to make noise and drown it out if we feel like that would be a good approach. Another approach would be locking arms, like a physical show of solidarity that if you come for one of us, you have to face all of us. So we're thinking, you know, we might lock arms and just surround the person with us facing outwards, so that we're still able to see the targeted, the harasser, and be able to surround the targeted person. So those are, you know, different options and methods you can do that show without necessarily having to confront the harasser. This may not be as with these methods. I see the other second part of the question is there a way to even use distract while being able to get consent from the targeted person? And I think in some of these scenarios, when everything's happening, we may not be able to get consent. And I think if we can reduce harm, minimize harm, and help and show solidarity to the targeted person, you know, we'll do what we can in that moment. I know it's not always realistic or possible to get consent, but we'll try as much as possible to do so. So now I want to pause and make some time for us to practice. I will give a content warning that this activity contains 3 scenarios that broadly describe anti-Asian racism and verbal harassment. And so if you do not want to participate in the activity, that is completely okay. If you would like to go to the healing breakout room, that is completely okay as well. So we'll head over to the next slide, and I'm going to give folks about 5 minutes to look through these scenarios. There's 3 scenarios, and you can pick any one of the scenarios, or you can respond to all 3 scenarios that present a broad situation that's occurring, and then you'll respond by saying what you would do as a bystander. So we'll put in the link in the chat to access this. It's in there. So once you follow the link, you'll see a Jamboard. And once you get to the Jamboard, you'll see Post-its, and you just have to double click to be able to edit and write on them. So I'll give everyone about 5 minutes until 11:55. Again, if you do not want to do this activity, if you prefer to opt out, completely okay. Feel free to go to the breakout room or take some time for yourself. So we'll check back in 5 minutes. It'll take about 2 more minutes. All right, so that is 11:55. I'll pause here to see if there are any questions or things that came up. I see a lot of really great answers in the Jamboard, so it looks like everybody is on the right track, and a lot of ways that we can creatively, use what's in the environment to address the scenarios. That's all good to see. And so as we close out and wrap up, I wanted to end on um, really envisioning what safety for our communities looks like. And I think it's important for us to take time to envision and think about what safety means, what it feels like for our communities, because so much of the time and our energy is spent on almost like fighting off the things that we don't want, or naming like, this is not safety, this is not safety, but what is safety? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? What does it look like? What words would you use to describe it? How would it change your life? What are some things you'd be able to do differently that you aren't able to do now because of the lack of safety? What values is this rooted in? What's the vision for this? So I wanted to give everyone about 2 minutes to jot down some notes. It can look like drawings or any other creative form to kind of express what your responses would be to this. And then we'll have a little bit of time for people to share back in the chat what they came up with. Does anybody want to share what they came up with for their vision? So someone shared, safety for me is being surrounded by supportive people, either known or unknown. With this known for myself, I need to make a commitment to show others that I can be relied upon to be a supportive individual. For me, the ideal community would be less violent, less prejudice, healthier, and more positive. It would feel more accepting and loving. As a woman and a woman of color, I would feel safer going out and more confident in my abilities. It would be rooted in values of inclusivity, respect, empathy, and solidarity. A future without violence looks like poppy juice party in the streets. These are beautiful. Thank you for sharing, and feel free to keep adding them to the chat and keep thinking about what this looks like. So I think it's just as important for us to spend time and energy thinking about and working towards what we want to build for. So I know we're at time, and I wanted to take a moment to close out. Questions, things that they have learned, skills or values that they have picked up through this. Knowing those around me will step in if needed, having warm, friendly, respectful interactions in the community. Safety means freedom for all of us to exist as we are. This requires commitment to the idea that safety means safety for everyone. Yes, I love these, and I think it's so critical to remember that each of us have the ability to create safety for each other and for our community. And you know, seeing projects like the community response corps, they're just community members that came together and created a plan to keep each other safe. So all of us are absolutely capable of being part of that. I also see someone shared investing in community care and inclusivity, understanding, respect that anyone can walk alone in the day or in the dark and know that they have support and protection in their community. Yes, yes. We keep each other safe. So on that note, I will hand it back to AAPI Women Lead to close us out, and if there's anything else you'd like to share.
Thank you so much, Halima, for leading this training, this bystander training. It was really helpful for me to learn these skills. It's the first time I'm hearing this. And I also appreciate everyone contributing and asking these really good questions and visions of what we want for our future. What is the world that we want to build when it comes to community and safety? And for AAPI Women Lead, when we created this series, it was out of an immediate need. A lot of people were interested in learning these skills, which is essentially why we built this series. Because people said they wanted to learn de-escalation, they wanted to learn bystander training. They also wanted to learn like physical defense. So I appreciate Halima kind of bringing this all together to remind us that we use these skills to keep each other safe, and to also understand, and also to share that we also understand that the current systems harm a lot of us as well. So we're trying to create and build a new world where we want to reduce harm, even for the attacker. How do we reduce their harm? Because a lot of the times it's jail, prison, deportations. A lot of the times people it creates more violence, right? So we at AAPI Women Lead, with the leadership of the likes of Halima, we're trying to envision and build a world where we end violence and reduce harm for all of us.
Yeah, and I would actually add, as you brought that up, like during or after an intervention, you can also ask someone to follow up with the harasser if you're comfortable doing so. And at that particular incident that I had mentioned at the press conference, there was a BART police officer that kind of pulled this man away. And after the incident had occurred, we had asked, what happened to him? And we found out this person got booked at Santa Rita jail. And so I've been trying to follow up and see like, what can we do to support this person, recognizing that they also need resources and help. And that wasn't an outcome that any of us, including the targeted person, wanted to happen. So that's a really key point, Jenny, that you mentioned.
Yeah, and API Women Lead has worked with survivors, and a lot of the times their response is, we just want the harm to stop. Because some of the solutions that we currently live under is, we don't want some of these people, these are community members that we don't want to get locked up or go to jail and have criminal records, and essentially remove our own community members from our community. I hope that makes sense. So with that being said, we hope that this training empowers, but also equips everyone to think about ways they could be, how we can keep each other safe in these times. And as Halima mentioned, there's a lot of community groups that are doing safety walks, that are also learning these skills as well. So people are learning how to do this with each other, and relying on leaders that have been doing this for a long time. So, I encourage folks to join these organizations, do additional trainings, so that if you feel compelled to build your own group, like Halima is doing with her initiative, perhaps that is something you want to build out in your own communities also, right? So we hope that everyone walks away with something useful for yourselves and for each other, in the name of solidarity and keeping each other safe. So thank you everyone for joining us. Halima, do you want to add anything else?
No, I think you covered all of it, and I just want to give big props to everyone who came today, for listening, for practicing these, and we will be following up with resources so that you can continue to practice and work through these steps.
Thank you, everyone. We'll be around for maybe a few more minutes if folks have questions. Halima, if you need to log off, please feel free. But if you have questions for API Women Lead, we can take some if you'd like. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for spending your time with us. It means a lot. And we hope to see you on May 1st with our self-defense training. Thank you, everyone.